The fluorescent lights in the convenience store bathroom flickered the way they always did around closing time, casting shadows across the cracked mirror where Maya Chen stood, washing her hands with a thin pink soap that smelled of industrial disinfectant and broken promises. Her name tag sat crooked on her vest, the adhesive failing after another double shift that had started at 6 a.m. and wouldn't end until midnight. 16 hours of scanning items, restocking shelves, and smiling at customers who never looked her in the eye. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She dried her hands on brown paper towels that felt like sandpaper and checked the screen. A text from Riverside Elementary. Final notice regarding Lily's lunch account balance. $127.45 past due. Please remit payment by Friday or packed lunch only. Maya's throat tightened. She opened her banking app with fingers that trembled slightly from exhaustion. The balance stared back at her. $34.12. Rent was due in 6 days. $680 for the studio apartment above the laundromat where the dryers ran until 2 a.m. and the walls were so thin she could hear Mrs. Park's television through 3 layers of drywall. She'd worked 87 hours this week between the convenience store and her weekend housekeeping jobs at the Riverside Motor Inn. 87 hours that translated to $743 before taxes, $589 after the government took its share. Not enough. Never enough. The bathroom door opened and her manager, Derek, appeared. His expression carried the particular blend of annoyance and indifference that came from managing night shifts at a store that sold lottery tickets and expired milk. Maya, Register 3 needs restocking. Can you handle that before your shift ends? She wanted to say no, wanted to explain that her feet had stopped feeling like feet hours ago and had become abstract concepts of pain, that her back ached from lifting boxes and her wrist throbbed from repetitive scanning motions, that her daughter was asleep at Mrs. Park's apartment upstairs from their own, and Maya hadn't seen her awake in 3 days except for the 10 minutes before school. Instead, she said what she always said, of course. The restocking took 45 minutes. By the time she clocked out, it was 12:47 a.m. She walked the 4 blocks to their apartment building, passing closed storefronts and the bus stop where she waited every morning at 5:30. The November air cut through her thin jacket, but she'd long since stopped noticing cold the way she'd stopped noticing hunger between meals she sometimes skipped. Mrs. Park answered the door in her bathrobe, eyes heavy with sleep. Lily was good. She did her homework, ate dinner, went to bed at 8:30. Thank you so much. I don't know what I'd do without you. The older woman's expression softened. You work too hard, Maya. This isn't sustainable. I know. I'm trying. I just need... She didn't finish the sentence because she didn't know what came next. I just need what? A miracle? A different life? A world where single mothers weren't slowly ground to dust by systems designed to extract everything and give back nothing? Lily slept in the twin bed they shared, her small body curled around the stuffed elephant Maya had found at a thrift store 2 Christmases ago. Maya changed into pajamas that had seen better years, climbed in beside her daughter, and stared at the water-stained ceiling until exhaustion dragged her under. The eviction notice arrived on Wednesday. Maya found it taped to their door when she got home from her morning shift at 2 p.m. Official letterhead from Riverside Property Management. Legal language that translated to, the building has been sold. All tenants must vacate within 90 days. No exceptions. 90 days to find a new place. That meant first month's rent, last month's rent, security deposit. At minimum, $2,000 for anything remotely habitable in Riverside. Her savings account held $127, the result of 3 years of depositing whatever she could spare after expenses, which was usually nothing. She sat on the front steps of the building, the notice crumpling in her fist, and did the math that wouldn't work no matter how she approached it. 3 months wasn't enough time to save $2,000. Not with her current income, not with Lily's needs, not with the universe's apparent commitment to ensuring she never quite reached stable ground. A car pulled up to the curb. Not just any car, a Mercedes SUV that looked like it had been driven off the showroom floor yesterday. A woman emerged, dressed in a business suit that probably cost more than Maya made in 2 months. She was in her 50s, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that assessed Maya with the clinical precision of someone accustomed to evaluating assets. Maya Chen. Yes. My name is Victoria Hartwell. I'm an attorney with Hartwell and Associates. I've been trying to reach you for the past 3 weeks. Maya stood slowly, suddenly aware of how she must look in her convenience store uniform, hair pulled back in a messy bun, exhaustion written across every feature. I don't understand. I haven't done anything wrong. No, nothing like that. Victoria's expression softened slightly. I represent the estate of Father Michael Chen. The name landed like a stone in still water. Father Michael, Maya's uncle, though she'd met him exactly twice in her life. Once at her mother's funeral when she was 8, again at her father's funeral when she was 22. He'd been a Catholic priest who'd spent 40 years running a small mission in Riverside, living in poverty by choice, ministering to a community that could barely support itself. He passed away 6 weeks ago, Victoria continued. I've been trying to locate you to discuss his will. Maya's mind spun. I didn't know he died. The funeral was small. He didn't have much family, and the few relatives he had were scattered. Victoria pulled a folder from her briefcase. He left you something. His property, the mission building and the land it sits on. The St. Lucia mission. Maya had seen it exactly once, during her father's funeral. A crumbling structure on the edge of town, half hidden by overgrown vegetation, with boards over broken windows and a roof that sagged in places. The kind of building that whispered demolition before you even got close. The property isn't worth much, Victoria said carefully. The building is in severe disrepair. It was condemned by the city 5 years ago, but your uncle insisted you receive it. He was quite specific in his will. Maya looked at the eviction notice in her hand, then back at Victoria. How much does the property cost? In fees or taxes or whatever? The property taxes are current through the end of the year. After that, approximately $800 annually. As for transfer fees, Victoria pulled out paperwork. I've already handled those through the estate. If you want it, you just need to sign here. The property becomes yours legally. What's the catch? Victoria smiled, something like respect in her expression. No catch. Your uncle loved you, even from a distance. He wanted you to have something of value, even if that value isn't immediately obvious. Maya thought about the studio apartment she was losing, about Lily who deserved more than a shared twin bed and a mother who was never home, about the building that everyone said was worthless but represented something her uncle had cherished enough to ensure it survived him. She took the pen Victoria offered. Where do I sign? The St. Lucia mission sat on a half-acre lot at the southern edge of Riverside, where the town gave way to the scrubland and abandoned industrial sites. The building had been constructed in 1897, according to the brass plaque that still clung to the front wall, though the metal had tarnished so thoroughly the words were barely legible. Maya stood in front of it on Saturday morning, Lily's small hand in hers, trying to see past what everyone else saw. Disaster. The structure was larger than she'd remembered. 2 stories of red brick that had weathered to a dusty burgundy, with tall arched windows that would have been beautiful if most of them weren't broken or boarded over. The front entrance featured a wooden door that hung at an angle, one hinge completely broken. The roof showed visible holes where tiles had fallen away, and the gutters dangled like broken limbs. But it was the mosaic work that caught her attention. Above the entrance, partially hidden by decades of grime and damage, she could make out what had once been an elaborate mosaic depicting St. Lucia holding her lamp. The tiles were small, possibly hand-cut, in colors that even under layers of dirt showed remarkable depth. Blues that ranged from deep navy to pale sky, golds that caught morning light, whites that suggested robes or clouds. Most of the mosaic was damaged. Tiles had fallen away in patches, leaving gaps like missing teeth. Water damage had obscured large sections, but what remained suggested something extraordinary, the kind of craftsmanship that didn't exist anymore. Mama, it looks like a castle. Lily's voice carried wonder rather than fear. At 7 years old, she still saw possibility where adults saw only problems. It needs a lot of work, baby. Can we live here? The question hung between them. The building was condemned, which meant legally uninhabitable. But the eviction notice gave them 90 days. 90 days to find somewhere else, which would require money Maya didn't have. Or 90 days to make this work somehow. She thought about Victoria Hartwell's words. He wanted you to have something of value, even if that value isn't immediately obvious. Maybe, Maya said softly. Maybe we can. She'd brought tools borrowed from her coworker Ricardo, a basic kit in a rusted toolbox that had seen better decades. Now she approached the front entrance, testing each step carefully before trusting her weight to boards that groaned but held. The door opened with resistance, hinges screaming in protest. Inside, the smell hit first. Mildew and decay and something else she couldn't quite identify. Dust motes danced in shafts of light that penetrated through gaps in the roof and broken windows. The interior took her breath away. The main room stretched perhaps 40 feet long and 30 feet wide, with a ceiling that soared 20 feet overhead. The floor was covered in debris, fallen plaster, broken wood, shattered glass. But underneath, she could see more mosaic work. Not just decorative accents, but entire floor sections done in intricate geometric patterns. The walls showed water damage and crumbling plaster, but between the destruction, she spotted more mosaics. A pattern of vines and flowers climbing one wall. What looked like a scene of figures, though damage made it impossible to identify the subject. Near the front, in what would have been the altar area, a large mosaic rose from floor to ceiling, so covered in grime and damage she could barely make out the image. "It's beautiful," Lily whispered, her voice echoing in the empty space. Maya walked carefully through the debris, aware of how unstable everything felt. The building had been abandoned for at least 15 years, maybe longer. The roof leaked extensively, as evidenced by the water stains and rotted wood. The windows were nearly all broken. The floor in several places had rotted through, revealing a crawl space beneath. Any rational person would look at this and see an impossible project. But Maya had stopped being rational the moment she signed the eviction notice and realized she had nothing left to lose. She spent the first hour simply clearing a path from the entrance to the back of the building. The debris was extensive: fallen plaster, broken furniture that had been left behind, shattered glass from the windows. She filled trash bags Ricardo had provided, working steadily while Lily sat near the entrance with her coloring books, occasionally looking up to watch her mother work. By noon, Maya had cleared enough space to see the full extent of the main room. The walls were in worse shape than she'd initially thought. Large sections of plaster had fallen away, exposing the brick and wooden framework beneath. The ceiling showed dangerous sagging in multiple places. The floor, where visible beneath the debris, was a patchwork of intact mosaic and sections where tiles had been damaged or were missing entirely. But the mosaics themselves, even in their damaged state, were stunning. The colors that showed through the grime suggested someone had worked with remarkable skill. The geometric patterns on the floor created optical illusions of depth and movement. The figural work on the walls, though badly damaged, showed faces and hands rendered with delicate precision. Maya pulled out her phone and took photographs of everything. Not professional documentation, just a record of what existed. She'd never studied art history beyond a community college class she'd taken years ago, but even to her untrained eye, these mosaics seemed significant. Mrs. Elena Vargas appeared in the doorway around 1 p.m., carrying a thermos and a paper bag. She was in her late 60s, with gray hair pulled into a bun and the kind of face that suggested a lifetime of hard work and strong faith. Maya recognized her from the convenience store where she bought lottery tickets every Wednesday. "I saw you were here," Elena said, her accent carrying traces of her childhood in Mexico. "I brought lunch. Tamales and cafe con leche." Maya's pride wanted to refuse, but her stomach overruled. She hadn't eaten since dinner the night before. "Thank you. That's very kind." They sat on the front steps while Lily ate her tamale with visible delight. Elena looked at the building with an expression that combined nostalgia and sorrow. "I came to this mission for 20 years, she said quietly. "Father Michael, he was a good man. He helped my family when we had nothing. My husband got sick, couldn't work. Father Michael, he made sure we had food, helped with the rent, never asked for anything back. I barely knew him, Maya admitted. I met him twice my whole life. He talked about you sometimes. Said his niece was strong, determined. Said you reminded him of your father before life broke him. Elena paused. He loved this place. The mosaics especially. He used to say they were like prayers made visible. But the building, it's been dying for a long time. The parish couldn't afford repairs. The archdiocese wanted to tear it down, build something modern. Father Michael fought them for years. Why didn't they fix it? Elena's smile was sad. No money. The parish is poor. Most people here, they work 2, 3 jobs just to survive. Can't give much in collection. The archdiocese, they have other priorities. Bigger churches in richer neighborhoods. They sent letters saying the building was dangerous, needed to close. Father Michael, he refused to leave. Stayed here until the city condemned it 5 years ago. Maya looked at the building, at the broken windows and sagging roof. And then what happened? Then he moved into a small apartment, but came here every day. Cleaned what he could, tried to stop the decay. He knew he was fighting a losing battle, but he couldn't let go. Elena placed her weathered hand over Maya's. He left it to you because he believed you'd see what he saw. Not a ruined building, but something worth saving. After Elena left, Maya stood in the center of the main room, turning slowly to take in the full scope of what she'd inherited. The afternoon light slanted through broken windows, illuminating dust particles and highlighting the mosaic work that remained visible. She walked to the large mosaic near the front, the one that rose from floor to ceiling. It was heavily damaged, large sections missing, other parts obscured by grime and water stains. But as she looked closer, studying what remained, she could make out figures. Multiple figures arranged in a composition that suggested a scene of significant importance. Maya found a rag in her borrowed toolbox and carefully cleaned a small section near the bottom. The rag came away black with decades of accumulated dirt. Underneath, colors emerged. A blue so vivid it seemed to glow. Gold that caught the light and threw it back. White that suggested robes or clouds. She cleaned another section, working carefully to avoid damaging the tiles. More colors appeared. Faces became visible, rendered with extraordinary detail. The tiles were tiny, possibly a centimeter or less on each side, creating images that looked almost photographic in their precision. This wasn't amateur work. This was master craftsmanship. Maya spent the next hour cleaning more sections, revealing additional details. The scene appeared to depict a gathering of figures, possibly saints or biblical characters, arranged around a central figure she couldn't yet see clearly. The composition was complex, showing depth and perspective that shouldn't have been possible with the limited medium of small tiles. Her hands trembled as she worked. She'd stumbled into something significant. She could feel it. These mosaics weren't just decorative church art. There was something else entirely. Lily appeared at her side. "Mama, you're making it pretty. I'm just cleaning it, baby. Seeing what's underneath all the dirt. It's like treasure." The word hung in the air. Treasure. Maya thought about that community college art history class, about the lectures on Byzantine mosaics and Renaissance techniques, about how the professor had shown slides of ancient churches in Italy and Greece where walls were covered in elaborate tile work that had survived for centuries. She pulled out her phone and searched Byzantine mosaics value. The results made her breath catch. Articles about archaeological discoveries, museum acquisitions, private collectors willing to pay millions for authenticated ancient works. But these couldn't be that old. The mission was built in 1897, Victorian era. But Victorian builders sometimes incorporated older materials, sometimes even entire artworks salvaged from European churches that had been destroyed or renovated. Maya's heart hammered. She needed expert opinion, needed someone who could tell her whether this was 19th century reproduction or something genuinely ancient and valuable. But expert opinions required money she didn't have, and announcing a potential discovery might attract attention she wasn't prepared to handle. She thought about the eviction notice, about Lily's school lunch debt, about the $34.12 in her bank account. about the building everyone assumed was worthless and the mosaics hiding beneath decades of grime. "Come on, Lily. We need to go home, but we're coming back tomorrow. Are we going to live here?" Maya looked at her daughter's hopeful face, at the building that seemed impossible, at the mosaics that whispered of secrets and value hidden in plain sight. "Maybe. I don't know yet, but we're not giving up on it." The first week became a pattern. Maya worked her convenience store shifts, picked up Lily from school, stopped at the mission for whatever hours remained before dark. She focused on a main room, clearing debris, stabilizing the worst of the structural damage, and carefully cleaning sections of the mosaic work. Each section she cleaned revealed more remarkable detail. The tiles weren't just arranged in simple patterns. They created subtle gradations of color and shadow that suggested three-dimensional form. The faces showed individual expressions, personalities. The hands displayed anatomical precision. The composition demonstrated sophisticated understanding of perspective and light. Ricardo from the convenience store stopped by one evening, curious about what Maya was doing. He stood in the center of the main room, looking at the partially cleaned mosaics, his expression shifting from polite interest to genuine shock. "Mija, this is serious work. This isn't some church volunteer putting up pretty tiles. This is professional, maybe even famous." "I've been thinking the same thing, but I don't know how to find out for sure without telling people. And if I tell people, then you lose control of it," Ricardo finished. "Then suddenly you've got the archdiocese saying it belongs to the church, or the city saying the building should be demolished anyway, or collectors showing up making offers." Maya nodded. "Exactly. I need to understand what I have before I tell anyone. But I don't know how to do that." Ricardo pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts. "My cousin's wife teaches art history at the community college. She's good people, discreet. Let me see if she'd be willing to take a look unofficially." 2 days later, Dr. Sarah Martinez stood in the St. Lucia mission, staring at the partially cleaned mosaics with an expression that cycled through disbelief, awe, and barely contained excitement. She was in her early 40s, with short dark hair and eyes that moved across the artwork with the focused intensity of someone trained to analyze and categorize. She'd spent the first 30 minutes simply looking, taking photographs with a professional camera, occasionally stepping closer to examine individual tiles. Finally, she spoke. "Maya, do you understand what you have here? Old mosaics? Not just old. Look at the technique." Sarah pointed to a section showing a figure's face. "This is Byzantine work. Authentic Byzantine, probably 11th or 12th century. The color palette, the tesserae size and composition, the way the artist used gold leaf, this is consistent with work from Constantinople during the Macedonian dynasty." Maya's throat went dry. "That's not possible. The building was constructed in 1897. The building was, yes. But these mosaics were installed, then using materials salvaged from somewhere else. In the late 1800s, many European churches were being demolished or renovated. Wealthy collectors and even church officials sometimes purchased architectural elements, entire walls, ceiling sections, floor panels, and incorporated them into new buildings. Sarah moved to the large wall mosaic, the one Maya had been cleaning most extensively. "This is the most significant piece. If I'm right about what this depicts, and I need better cleaning and more research to confirm, this could be part of a lost cycle." A lost cycle? A series of mosaics depicting specific biblical or historical scenes that was documented in historical records, but believed destroyed. There's a cycle that disappeared from the Nea Moni Monastery in Greece around 1881. The monastery was damaged in an earthquake, and several major mosaic panels were supposedly sold to an American collector. But they vanished. No one knew what happened to them. Maya felt the room tilt slightly. How much would something like that be worth? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "If this is what I think it is, and if it's authenticated properly, you're looking at tens of millions. Possibly more." The Getty Museum paid $42 million for a single Byzantine mosaic panel in 2008. This, she gestured to the wall, is multiple panels, possibly an entire preserved cycle. The number was too large to process. Tens of millions. $42 million. Maya thought about her $34.12 bank balance, about Lily's school lunch debt, about the eviction notice. What do I do? First, you protect it. Don't tell anyone else. Don't start major cleaning without expert guidance. You could damage it accidentally. Second, you need authentication. That requires bringing in specialists, but you need to be very careful about who you trust. Sarah pulled out her phone, scrolling through contacts. I have a colleague at the Metropolitan Museum, Dr. James Whitmore. He's one of the foremost Byzantine art experts in the country. And more importantly, he's ethical. He won't try to manipulate you or steal your discovery. Can you contact him for me? I will. But Maya, understand what you're about to start. Once word gets out about this, you'll face pressure from every direction. Museums wanting to acquire it, collectors making offers, the church claiming ownership, the city trying to assert eminent domain. You'll need lawyers, security, expertise you probably can't afford. Maya thought about Father Michael, who'd fought the archdiocese for years to keep this building standing, who'd lived in poverty while protecting something he believed had value, who'd left it to her specifically, trusting she'd do what needed to be done. Contact your colleague. I want to know what I'm protecting. Dr. Whitmore arrived 5 days later, traveling from New York on a red-eye flight, clearly unable to contain his curiosity about what Sarah had described. He was in his late 50s, with gray hair and the kind of energy that suggested passionate dedication to his field. He spent the entire first day examining the mosaics without saying more than a dozen words. He took photographs, measurements, samples of individual tiles for analysis. He studied the composition, the technique, the materials. Maya watched him work, her nervousness growing with each hour of his silent assessment. Finally, as evening light slanted through the broken windows, he stood in front of the main wall mosaic and spoke. This is the NEA Moni cycle. I'm 95% certain, and the sample analysis will confirm or refute that. If I'm right, and I believe I am, you own one of the most significant Byzantine art discoveries in the last 50 years. Maya's legs felt weak. She sat on a piece of plywood she'd placed over a damaged section of floor. How is that possible? How did it end up in a small mission in California? Whitmore pulled out a folder, photographs and documents he'd brought from New York. In 1881, the monastery was severely damaged. An American industrialist named Thomas Blackwood, he made his fortune in railroads and steel, was touring Greece as part of a grand tour. He heard about the damaged monastery and purchased several mosaic panels. But he didn't keep them. According to letters I found in archives, he donated them to his cousin, Father Jonathan Chen. Chen, that's my family name. Father Jonathan Chen was a Catholic missionary who founded the St. Lucia Mission. Blackwood was Catholic, wanted the mosaics preserved in a sacred space. So he shipped them here, and Father Jonathan built the mission specifically to house them. Maya's mind reeled. Her great-great-grandfather had received priceless Byzantine mosaics and built a church to preserve them. But somewhere along the way, the knowledge of their value had been lost. Generations had passed. The building had fallen into disrepair, and now she, barely able to pay rent, owned an art treasure worth millions. What's the next step? Her voice came out smaller than she intended. Whitmore sat beside her on the plywood. Authentication. I need to bring in a team, materials analysts, historical researchers, other Byzantine specialists. We need to verify the tiles' composition, confirm they match samples from NEA Moni, establish the provenance chain definitively. How long does that take? 6 to 8 weeks for preliminary authentication. Full documentation could take months. But once we establish this is genuine, you'll have options. Museums will want to acquire it. Private collectors will make offers. The church might claim it belongs to them. You'll need legal representation to navigate all of that. Maya thought about the eviction notice, about the 90-day deadline that was now down to 73 days, about the building that everyone said should be demolished and the treasure hidden inside that most people couldn't see. Start the authentication. But Dr. Whitmore, I need you to understand something. I'm a single mother working 2 jobs to keep my daughter fed. I can't afford lawyers or security or any of the things you're talking about. If powerful people come for this, I have nothing to fight them with. Whitmore's expression softened. That's why we need to document everything immediately and establish clear legal ownership before anyone else knows what you have. Sarah and I will help with that. You're not alone in this. But even as he said it, Maya knew that alone was exactly what she'd be when this became public. Her against museums, collectors, churches, anyone who decided they wanted what she'd inherited. Her with her $34.12 bank balance, and her borrowed tools, and her determination that had carried her this far but might not be enough. That night, back in a studio apartment with Lily asleep beside her, Maya lay awake staring at the water-stained ceiling. Tomorrow she'd call in sick to the convenience store for the first time in 3 years. Tomorrow Dr. Whitmore would return with his team to begin the formal authentication process. Tomorrow, she'd take the first irreversible step toward either securing her daughter's future or losing everything in a battle she wasn't equipped to fight. The choice had already been made. Father Michael had made it when he left her this building. She'd made it when she signed the paperwork accepting it. Now, she just had to see it through, no matter what came next. Outside, Riverside slept, unaware that hidden in the condemned mission on its southern edge lay treasure that would change everything. Dr. Whitmore's authentication team arrived on a Tuesday morning in 3 unmarked vans, deliberately nondescript to avoid drawing attention. 6 specialists emerged, each carrying equipment that looked both expensive and impossibly delicate. Maya watched from the mission entrance as they unloaded cameras, lighting rigs, spectroscopy devices, and cases of instruments she couldn't begin to name. The team leader was Dr. Rebecca Stone, a materials scientist from Yale who specialized in Byzantine tile composition. She was in her 30s, efficient and focused, with the kind of precision that came from years of laboratory work. She shook Maya's hand firmly, her grip surprisingly strong. Dr. Whitmore briefed us on the situation. We'll work as quickly as possible, but thorough authentication can't be rushed. We need samples, photographs, measurements, chemical analysis. It's going to take time. How much time? Best case, 6 weeks for preliminary results. We'll know within the first week whether this is worth continuing, but definitive authentication requires comparison against known samples, historical documentation, peer review. Maya nodded, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. Understand. Do whatever you need to do. The team worked with remarkable efficiency, setting up their equipment throughout the main room. Lights on stands illuminated sections of the mosaic that had never seen such brightness. Cameras clicked constantly, documenting every angle. Dr. Stone used a device that looked like a handheld scanner, moving it slowly across the tiles while data populated on a connected tablet. Elena Vargas appeared mid-morning with coffee and pan dulce for everyone. She'd been coming daily since Maya had started working on the building, bringing food and occasionally helping with basic cleaning. Now she stood in the doorway, eyes wide at the professional equipment and the specialists moving with purposeful precision. "What's happening?" she whispered to Maya. "They're trying to determine if the mosaics are valuable. Father Michael always said they were special. He used to spend hours just looking at them, talking to them like they were old friends." Elena paused. "There's something you should know. A man came by my house yesterday, asking questions about the mission. Well-dressed, expensive car. Said he was interested in the building's history." Maya's stomach tightened. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing. I don't trust people in expensive cars asking questions about poor neighborhoods. But if I noticed him, others did too. Word is spreading that something's happening here." Dr. Whitmore overheard and joined them. "That's concerning. Once people realize we're authenticating the mosaics, the situation becomes significantly more complicated. Maya, you need to think about security." "I can't afford security." "Then we need to work faster and establish your legal ownership beyond question before the wrong people get interested." He gestured to the team. "I'm accelerating our timeline. We'll do round-the-clock shifts if necessary." By evening, the first preliminary results were coming in. Dr. Stone gathered everyone in the cleared section of the main room, her tablet displaying graphs and data that meant nothing to Maya, but clearly meant everything to the specialists. The tesserae composition is consistent with 11th century Byzantine work. The gold leaf contains trace elements that match samples from known NEA Moni pieces. The binding materials, the substrate, the installation technique, everything points to authentic medieval origin. Dr. Whitmore's face showed carefully controlled excitement. What's your confidence level? 80% based on materials analysis alone. If the historical documentation supports it, and if we can verify the provenance chain from NEA Moni to Thomas Blackwood to Father Jonathan Chun, we're looking at 95% certainty or higher. Maya found her voice. What does that mean in practical terms? It means, Dr. Whitmore said carefully, that you almost certainly own one of the most significant Byzantine art discoveries in modern history. The NEA Moni cycle was documented in 19th century sources as one of the finest examples of Macedonian-era Mosaic work. It was believed lost forever. If this is that cycle, and I believe it is, you're looking at a discovery that will rewrite art history. And the value? Dr. Stone exchanged a glance with Whitmore. Conservative estimate, assuming single-panel sales to museums and private collectors, $60 to $80 million. If you sold the entire cycle intact to a major institution, potentially more. The Getty paid $42 million for one panel. You have at least 8 major panels, possibly more under the damage and grime. The number was so large it felt abstract. Maya thought about her $34.12 bank balance, about the convenience store where she'd worked for 3 years, about Lily's school lunch debt of $127.45. The disconnect between those numbers and 60 to 80 million was so vast, it felt like they were discussing different universes. I need air. Maya walked outside, the November cold cutting through her thin jacket. She sat on the front steps, head in her hands, trying to process what she'd just learned. $60 million. $80 million. Hidden in a building everyone said was worthless, in a neighborhood where people worked 3 jobs and still couldn't make rent. Protected by her uncle who'd lived in poverty while sitting on a fortune he either didn't know about or chose not to exploit. Ricardo found her 20 minutes later. He sat beside her without speaking, just being present the way good friends do. Finally, he broke the silence. I heard some of what they said in there. Big numbers. Bigger than I can understand. What are you going to do? Maya looked at the mission, at the broken windows and sagging roof, at the building that held more value than most people in Riverside would see in 10 lifetimes. I don't know. Sell it, I guess. Take the money, secure Lily's future, maybe help people here who need it. That's the rational choice. Ricardo paused. But there's something you need to know. I've been asking around about your uncle, about why he never sold the mosaics or told anyone what he had. People who knew him say he was afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid that if the wrong people found out, they'd take it from the community. He believed this building belonged to Riverside, to the people who worshipped here, who found comfort here. He was afraid that selling it would mean it disappeared into some private collection or museum vault where nobody from here would ever see it again. Maya thought about that. So he kept it secret and let the building fall apart? He tried to maintain it, but the parish had no money. He was one man fighting time and poverty in a system that didn't care. Maybe he was waiting for someone who could do what he couldn't, protect it and make it serve the people it was meant to serve. The weight of that possibility settled on Maya's shoulders. Father Michael hadn't just left her a valuable asset. He'd left her a responsibility, a choice between personal gain and community preservation. Before she could respond, headlights swept across them. A black Mercedes SUV pulled up to the curb, and a man emerged who radiated wealth and authority. He was in his 50s, with silver hair and a suit that probably cost more than Maya made in 6 months. His smile was practiced, the kind used to disarm people before making demands. Miss Chen, I'm Richard Blackwood. I believe we should talk. Maya stood slowly. About what? About the property you've inherited. I represent the Blackwood Foundation. We're interested in acquiring the St. Lucia mission and its contents for preservation and public display. The last name registered. Blackwood, like Thomas Blackwood who donated the mosaics. My great-great-grandfather. The mosaics were his gift to this community, and my foundation wants to ensure they're properly preserved and made accessible. We're prepared to make a very generous offer. Dr. Whitmore appeared in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral, but his posture tense. Mr. Blackwood, I wasn't aware you were in Riverside. Dr. Whitmore, always a pleasure. I heard rumors you were authenticating something significant here. Blackwood's smile remained, but his eyes hardened. I'd hate to see my family's legacy mishandled or exploited. The mosaics aren't being exploited. They're being properly documented and authenticated by a woman with no experience in art preservation, no resources to protect them, and every incentive to sell to the highest bidder. Blackwood turned to Maya. Miss Chen, I'm offering you a way out. $1 million cash for the building and all its contents. You walk away financially secure, and the mosaics remain in careful hands. $1 million. The number should have been tempting. It was more money than Maya would make in 20 years at the convenience store. It could change her life, secure Lily's future, solve every financial problem she faced. But something in Blackwood's tone, in the way he'd shown up so quickly after the authentication began, in his emphasis on keeping things in careful hands, made her deeply suspicious. The preliminary authentication suggests the mosaics are worth significantly more than $1 million, she said carefully. Blackwood's smile tightened, preliminary being the key word. Authentication can take years. Legal challenges can be mounted. The archdiocese might claim the mosaics belong to the church. The city might assert eminent domain for public interest. You're a single mother working retail. Can you really afford years of litigation? Dr. Whitmore stepped forward. Are you threatening Miss Chen? I'm offering her practical advice. This isn't a fairy tale where the struggling mother suddenly becomes rich. This is the art world, where people with resources and connections determine outcomes. Miss Chen should take the generous offer before circumstances make it significantly less generous. Maya met his eyes. Get off my property. Excuse me. You heard me. This is my property, legally transferred and documented. You're trespassing. Leave. Blackwood's pleasant facade cracked entirely. You're making a mistake. A very serious mistake. My family has deep roots in this community. We have relationships with city officials, church leaders, legal experts. You have nothing. I have the mosaics. And I have expert testimony that they're worth far more than you're offering. That tells me you know exactly what they're worth, and you're trying to steal them for a fraction of their value. Ricardo stepped beside Maya, his presence supportive. You heard her. Time to go. Blackwood looked at them both, his expression cycling through anger, calculation, and finally something like respect mixed with contempt. This isn't over. You'll regret not taking my offer. He returned to his Mercedes and drove away. Maya's hands were shaking, adrenaline flooding her system now that the confrontation was over. Dr. Whitmore placed a hand on her shoulder. That was brave. But he's right about one thing. You're about to face serious pressure from multiple directions. We need to accelerate everything and establish your position legally before people like Blackwood can mount challenges. That night, Maya couldn't afford to skip her convenience store shift. She arrived at 10 p.m. for the overnight, her mind still spinning with million-dollar offers and authentication results and threats from wealthy men in expensive cars. Derek noticed her distraction. You okay? You seem out of it. Just tired. Long day. You've been calling in sick a lot lately. Missing shifts. I need to be able to count on you, Maya. The unfairness of it struck her. 3 years of perfect attendance, of taking every shift offered, of never complaining about the overnight hours or the impossible customers. And now, when something genuinely important was happening, when she was trying to secure a future beyond this store, she was being criticized. I understand. I'll do better. She worked the shift on autopilot, scanning items and restocking shelves while her mind churned through problems and possibilities. By 6 a.m., when her shift ended, she'd made several decisions. First, she needed a lawyer, not someone who worked for museums or foundations, but someone who would represent her interests specifically. Sarah Martinez had mentioned a cousin who did property and estate law. Maya would call her. Second, she needed to document everything, every interaction with Blackwood, every step of the authentication, every piece of evidence establishing her legal ownership. If this became a fight, she needed weapons. Third, She needed to finish cleaning at least one complete mosaic panel, something that could be photographed and shown to prove the discovery's significance. The authentication was happening behind closed doors. Public opinion would matter when powerful people try to take this from her. She picked up Lily from Mrs. Parks, where her daughter had spent the night so Maya could work. Lily was growing accustomed to the irregular schedule, to sleeping in different places, to her mother's constant exhaustion. She deserved better. The mosaics represented a chance to give her better. "Mama, can we go to the pretty building today?" "Yes, baby. We're going there right now." The authentication team had worked through the night. Maya found them in various states of exhaustion, surrounded by equipment and data printouts. Dr. Stone approached with a tablet displaying detailed analysis. "We've confirmed Byzantine origin on all tested sections. The gold leaf contains trace elements matching NEA Moni samples from museum archives. The pigments in the glass tiles correspond to 11th century Mediterranean production techniques. Maya, this is definitely the lost cycle." Dr. Whitmore joined them, his face showing both excitement and concern. "We need to discuss next steps. The discovery is going to become public knowledge soon. Too many people involved for it to stay secret. When that happens, you'll face multiple claims. The Archdiocese will likely assert that church property belongs to the church. The city might claim the right to preserve it as a cultural landmark. Collectors and museums will make offers. And people like Blackwood will use every legal and possibly illegal means to acquire it." Maya felt the weight of it crushing down. "What do I do?" "You need representation. Legal, financial, and public relations. You need to control the narrative before others define it for you." Sarah's cousin, Jennifer Rodriguez, arrived that afternoon. She was in her early 40s, with the kind of sharp competence that came from years of fighting difficult cases. She listened to Maya's story without interrupting, taking notes, asking occasional clarifying questions. When Maya finished, Jennifer sat back. "Okay, here's the situation legally. The property was legally transferred to you through your uncle's will. That's solid. The mosaics are considered fixtures, permanent attachments to the property, which means they transferred with the building. However, the Archdiocese could argue that church property held in trust for religious purposes cannot be individually owned. That's their strongest claim. Can they win that argument? Possibly, but there's a counter-argument. Your uncle was the legal owner of the property. When the Archdiocese allowed the building to be condemned and abandoned it, they effectively relinquished their interest. He maintained it privately for years without church support. That suggests personal rather than church ownership. What about Blackwood?" Jennifer's expression hardened. "His family donated the mosaics, but donation means relinquishing ownership. He has no legal claim, only a publicity angle about family legacy. That said, wealthy people can make expensive problems even when they have no legal standing. We need to be prepared for aggressive litigation. I can't afford aggressive litigation. I can barely afford you. We'll work something out. My cousin Sarah explained your situation. I'm willing to work on contingency. I get paid if and when you successfully defend or sell the mosaics. But Maya, you need to understand what you're signing up for. This could take years. The stress will be enormous. You might win everything or lose everything." Maya thought about Lily, about the eviction notice, about Father Michael who'd protected these mosaics for decades without benefiting from them, about the choice between security and principle. "Start the paperwork. I'm fighting for this." The story broke 3 days later, not through official channels, but through social media. Someone on Dr. Whitmore's team, despite confidentiality agreements, had shared photos and details with a friend who posted them online. Within hours, the images went viral. Byzantine mosaics worth millions found in condemned California mission. Single mother's inheritance might be art discovery of the century. Pictures of the partially cleaned mosaics, of the mission's exterior, of Maya standing in the main room, looking exhausted and overwhelmed. By evening, news crews had gathered on the street. Reporters knocked on the mission door, asking for interviews. Neighbors came out to see what the commotion was about. The quiet, secret authentication had become a public spectacle. Elena found Maya hiding in the back room, trying to comfort a frightened Lily who didn't understand why strangers were taking pictures of their building. "You need to talk to them," Elena said gently. "If you don't tell your story, others will tell it for you, and they won't get it right." Maya knew she was right. She asked Elena to watch Lily, then walked outside to face the cameras and microphones thrust toward her. "Miss Chen, how did you discover the mosaics? Is it true they're worth $80 million? What are you going to do with the money? Are you selling to museums or private collectors?" Maya held up her hands, waiting for the chaos to quiet. When it did, she spoke clearly, trying to keep her voice steady. "My uncle, Father Michael Chen, left me this building when he died. He spent 40 years running a mission here, serving one of the poorest neighborhoods in Riverside. The mosaics were installed when the building was constructed in 1897, but their value was forgotten over time. I'm working with experts to authenticate and preserve them properly. Will you sell them? I don't know yet. My priority is protecting them and making sure they're handled responsibly. The Blackwood Foundation says they have a claim based on family donation. Thomas Blackwood donated the mosaics to Father Jonathan Chen and this mission over a century ago. That donation was completed. The Blackwood family relinquished any ownership claimed generations ago." A reporter from the front shouted. Archbishop Williams issued a statement saying the Archdiocese plans to file a claim for church property. "How do you respond?" Maya felt her stomach drop. She hadn't seen that statement. The church abandoned this building years ago. They condemned it and refused to help maintain it. My uncle preserved it privately, using his own resources. The Archdiocese has no claim to property they abandoned. She answered a few more questions, then retreated inside, her hands shaking. Jennifer Rodriguez called minutes later. "I saw the news coverage. You did well. But the Archdiocese filing a formal claim changes things. They have significant legal resources. This is going to get ugly." "How ugly?" "Full litigation. Discovery, depositions, expert witnesses, years of court battles. And that's just the legal side. The PR battle will be just as intense." That night, after putting Lily to bed in their studio apartment, Maya sat at the rickety table and made a list of everything arrayed against her. The Blackwood Foundation with its wealthy connections and implied threats. The Archdiocese with its legal resources and claims to church property. The city, which might assert eminent domain for cultural preservation. Her own poverty and lack of resources to fight prolonged battles. The media attention that made everything more complicated. The authentication process that still needed months to complete. Against all of that, she had legal ownership documented through her uncle's will. Expert testimony that the mosaics were genuine and valuable. A lawyer working on contingency. Public sympathy as the struggling, single mother fighting powerful institutions. And determination that had carried her through 3 years of double shifts and impossible situations. The question was whether determination would be enough. The formal claim from the Archdiocese arrived by courier the next morning. Pages of legal language that essentially argued the St. Lucia mission had been church property held in trust for religious purposes, that Father Michael Chen had been a custodian rather than owner, and that the mosaics therefore belonged to the Archdiocese regardless of who held the building title. Jennifer reviewed it over the phone while Maya paced the mission's main room. "It's a stronger argument than I'd like. They're not claiming the building, just the mosaics as church artifacts. They're arguing separation, that the art can be removed from the property and claimed independently. Can they do that? They can argue it. Whether they win depends on how the court interprets the historical relationship between your uncle and the church. We need documentation, letters, financial records, anything showing the church abandoned the property and your uncle maintained it independently." Maya thought about the small office at the back of the mission, about the boxes she hadn't yet explored. "Let me look." My uncle kept records. She spent the afternoon digging through filing cabinets and boxes that had sat undisturbed for years. What she found painted a picture of steady abandonment by the church and desperate preservation by one man. Letters from the Archdiocese dating back to 1995, stating the St. Lucia mission was no longer financially viable and would be closed. Father Michael's responses, pleading for time, promising to cover costs personally. Financial records showing Father Michael paying utilities, insurance, and maintenance from his own modest pension rather than church funds. Repair receipts in his name, not the archdiocese's. Tax records showing the property transferred to his personal ownership in 2003 when the archdiocese formally deeded it to him to avoid liability. The paper trail was clear. The church had abandoned the mission legally and financially. Father Michael had taken personal ownership and responsibility. The archdiocese's claim was contradicted by their own documents. Jennifer's excitement was audible when Maya shared this. This is exactly what we need. They can't claim church property when they formally transferred ownership to your uncle. This significantly weakens their position. But even as small victories accumulated, new threats emerged. Maya arrived at the mission one morning to find graffiti spray-painted across the front wall. "Thief" in large red letters. Someone had thrown rocks through 2 of the remaining intact windows. The vandalism shook her more than the legal threats. This was personal, physical, a violation of the space she was trying to protect. She filed a police report, but the officer who responded was clearly skeptical. "You're in the news, fighting the church, and some wealthy foundation. People have strong feelings about that. Could have been anyone. Can you patrol the area more frequently? We're understaffed. I'll put in the report, but I can't promise regular patrols." Ricardo organized a neighborhood watch that night. 15 people from the surrounding blocks, many of them former parishioners who'd attended services at St. Lucia, volunteered to take shifts watching the building. Elena brought her 2 adult sons. The owner of the corner bodega, Marcus, brought his nephew. Others came, people who'd known Father Michael, who'd been helped by him, who believed in protecting something that belonged to their community. "Father Michael was there when my son got sick," Marcus said, standing outside the mission with his arms crossed. "Paid for medicine when I had no money. Never asked for anything back. I'm not letting some rich people destroy what he protected." The volunteers organized into shifts, rotating through the night. Maya felt both gratitude and guilt. These were people with their own struggles, their own jobs and families, now giving time and energy to protect her inheritance. But it wasn't just her inheritance, she realized. It was Father Michael's legacy. It was community history. It was the principle that valuable things shouldn't be taken from poor neighborhoods just because poor people couldn't defend them. The authentication completed its preliminary phase 3 weeks after it began. Dr. Whitmore gathered Maya, Jennifer, and Sarah in the mission to review the findings. "We have definitive confirmation. The mosaics are authentic Byzantine work from Nia Moni, dating to approximately 1050 to 1080 CE. The provenance chain from Nia Moni to Thomas Blackwood, to Father Jonathan Chun, to Father Michael Chun, to Maya is documented and verified." He pulled up images on his laptop, showing comparison between the St. Lucia mosaics and known Nia Moni pieces in museums. The similarities were undeniable. The same techniques, the same materials, the same artistic style. The cycle includes 8 major panels depicting the life of Christ, from Annunciation to Resurrection. Each panel is approximately 12 by 15 feet. Additionally, there are 14 smaller panels showing various saints and apostles. And the floor mosaics, which we've only partially examined, appear to be equally significant. Total value. Maya's voice came out as barely a whisper. Dr. Stone, who'd been working on the materials analysis, spoke up. "Conservative estimate, assuming sale to museums and institutions, $120 to $150 million. If a single institution wanted to acquire the entire cycle intact, potentially more, $150 million. The number was so astronomical, it felt fictional. Maya thought about the $34.12 that had been in her bank account a month ago, about the lunch debt and the eviction notice and the years of grinding poverty that had defined her entire adult life. "But there's something else," Dr. Whitmore continued, his expression serious. "During our examination of the structural elements, we found something hidden behind the main altar panel." He gestured to Dr. Stone, who opened a protective case and carefully removed a small object wrapped in acid-free tissue. She unwrapped it slowly, revealing a golden reliquary, ornate and ancient, encrusted with what appeared to be precious stones. This was concealed in a hollow space behind the mosaic. Based on the style and construction, it's approximately the same era as the mosaics. The stones are emeralds, rubies, and sapphires, all authentic. But more significantly, it contains a relic, a fragment of bone that historical documentation suggests might be from St. Lucia herself. Maya stared at the reliquary, at the gold that caught the light and threw it back in warm tones, at the jewels that even to her untrained eye looked impossibly valuable. How much is that worth? The reliquary alone, as a piece of medieval gold work, perhaps 5 to 10 million. If the relic is authentic and can be verified as St. Lucia, the religious and historical value makes it nearly priceless to certain institutions and collectors. Jennifer spoke up, her lawyer instincts immediately engaged. This changes everything. A holy relic? The church's claim just got significantly stronger. They'll argue religious artifacts must remain in church custody. But it was hidden, Maya said. Someone concealed it deliberately. Maybe Father Michael didn't even know it was there. Dr. Whitmore shook his head. Based on the concealment method and the fact that it was protected with the same care as the mosaics, I believe Thomas Blackwood hid it when he donated the panels. He must have acquired it along with the mosaics and understood its significance. The question is why he concealed it rather than giving it to the church openly. Sarah suggested maybe he was protecting it. In the 1890s, there was significant theft of religious artifact from churches. Hiding it ensured its preservation. Or, Jennifer added, he knew it would create complications. A relic of St. Lucia in a mission dedicated to St. Lucia? That would have attracted attention he maybe didn't want. Whatever the reason, Maya understood the implications. The discovery had just escalated from valuable art to religious significance. The archdiocese wouldn't back down now. Neither would collectors who specialized in medieval religious artifacts. And Richard Blackwood, whose great-great-grandfather had hidden this reliquary, would be even more desperate to acquire it. She was right. The call came that evening, not from Blackwood himself, but from his attorney, a man named Charles Hammond, who spoke with the practiced smoothness of someone accustomed to making problems disappear. Miss Chen, my client has increased his offer to $5 million for the property and all contents, including the recently discovered reliquary. The reliquary alone is worth 5 to 10 million. That's the museum valuation. Private sale value is always lower. And Miss Chun, you need to consider the totality of your situation. You face claims from the archdiocese, potential city action, and significant legal costs even if you ultimately prevail. 5 million is a clean resolution. You walk away wealthy beyond your wildest dreams. It's worth more than 5 million. Hammond's tone shifted, becoming less smooth. The archdiocese is filing for injunctive relief tomorrow. They're going to argue the reliquary must be immediately transferred to church custody pending litigation. You could lose access to everything while the case proceeds. That could take years. Can you afford to fight that long? Maya thought about her conversation with Jennifer about the legal strategy they developed. Your client has no claim to any of this. His family donated it generations ago. Tell him to stop wasting everyone's time. You're making enemies you can't afford to have. Richard Blackwood sits on the city council. He has relationships with the archdiocese, with judges, with people who can make your life very difficult. Is that a threat? It's reality. Take the 5 million while it's available. Maya ended the call, her hands shaking with anger more than fear. She was being squeezed from every direction. Legal claims, financial pressure, implied threats. The only thing keeping her from being completely overwhelmed was the support of people who had even less than she did. The neighborhood watch continued nightly. Elena brought food daily. Ricardo helped with cleaning and basic repairs. Marcus donated supplies from his bodega. Sarah provided academic credibility and expert contacts. Jennifer fought the legal battles. They were a community united against powerful forces that thought wealth and connections could simply take what they wanted. But even with that support, Maya felt the walls closing in. The archdiocese's injunction hearing was scheduled for the following week. The city council was discussing eminent domain for cultural preservation. Richard Blackwood was using his connections to pressure her from multiple angles. And Maya was still working overnight shifts at the convenience store because she had bills to pay and a daughter to feed, even as she fought for treasure worth hundreds of millions. That Friday night, finishing another shift at 6 a.m., Derek called her into his office. His expression was uncomfortable, apologetic, but firm. "Maya, I have to let you go. Corporate says your attendance has been too irregular. I fought for you, but they were insistent. I've worked here for 3 years. I've barely missed any shifts until recently. I know. I'm sorry, but that's their decision." Maya walked out of the convenience store for the last time, her vest and name tag left behind, her final paycheck barely enough to cover 1 week of expenses. She just lost her only stable income in the middle of the biggest fight of her life. She sat in her car in the parking lot and finally let herself cry. Not from fear or sadness, but from exhaustion. From the relentless pressure of trying to survive, while powerful people treated her life like a game they expected to win. But even through the tears, even through the overwhelming sense of being crushed by forces she couldn't control, Maya knew she wouldn't give up. Father Michael had protected these mosaics for 40 years without benefiting from them. He'd lived in poverty, died in poverty, and left this burden to her because he believed she'd do what he couldn't, find a way to preserve them without surrendering to people who saw everything as property to be acquired. She dried her eyes, started her car, and drove to the mission. The sun was rising over Riverside, painting the sky in colors that matched the mosaics, gold and blue and every shade between. Inside the building, Maya stood before the main panel depicting the resurrection. Christ rising from the tomb, hands raised, face radiating light rendered in thousands of tiny tiles. The artisan who created this 1,000 years ago had poured faith and skill into work that survived wars, earthquakes, neglect, and time itself. That art had been preserved through centuries by people who understood its value transcended money. Father Michael had been the latest guardian in a long chain stretching back to medieval monks who first set these tiles in place. Now Maya was the guardian, and guardianship meant more than legal ownership. It meant being willing to sacrifice for something bigger than personal gain. She didn't know how she'd win, didn't know how to fight the archdiocese and Blackwood and the city simultaneously, didn't know how she'd survive without a job or feed Lily or pay rent. But she knew she wouldn't sell, wouldn't surrender, wouldn't let these mosaics disappear into private collections or become trophies for institutions that already had more than they needed. The neighborhood was gathering outside. Elena and Ricardo and Marcus and dozens of others who'd come to support her, to watch the building, to stand against the forces trying to take it. Maya walked outside to meet them, and in their faces she saw a reflection of her own determination. These were people who understood what it meant to fight for something that mattered, who knew that sometimes the biggest battles were fought by the smallest forces. Together, they would find a way. They had to, because some things were worth more than money, more than security, more than the comfort of giving up. The mosaics would survive. The community would prevail, and Maya would prove that determination could overcome wealth, that principle mattered more than power, that guardianship was a calling higher than ownership. The real fight was just beginning. The injunction hearing took place in a courtroom that felt designed to intimidate. High ceilings, dark wood paneling, and a judge's bench elevated above everyone else like a throne. Maya sat beside Jennifer Rodriguez at the defendant's table, acutely aware of the archdiocese's legal team, 5 attorneys in expensive suits arrayed across from them like an army. Archbishop Williams himself attended, seated in the front row with an expression of benign concern that Maya suspected had been carefully practiced. Richard Blackwood sat 3 rows back, watching everything with the focused intensity of a predator waiting for weakness. Judge Margaret Sullivan entered, and everyone rose. She was in her 60s, with gray hair pulled into a severe bun and eyes that suggested she'd seen every legal maneuver attempted and wasn't impressed by any of them. The archdiocese's lead attorney, David Chun, no relation to Maya despite the shared surname, stood to present their argument. His voice carried the smooth confidence of someone who expected to win. Your Honor, this is a straightforward matter of preserving sacred religious artifacts. The reliquary of St. Lucia, along with the Byzantine mosaics depicting the life of Christ, are holy objects that belong in the custody of the Catholic Church. Miss Chen, while we sympathize with her situation, is not qualified to protect items of such profound religious and historical significance. He laid out their case methodically. The mosaics had been created for a monastery. The reliquary contained sacred remains. Father Michael Chen had been a priest serving the archdiocese. The St. Lucia mission had been church property. Therefore, everything should revert to church control. We're not seeking to deprive Miss Chen of compensation, he continued. The archdiocese is prepared to offer fair market value for the items, but they must be protected, preserved, and made accessible in appropriate religious contexts, not left in the hands of someone who lacks resources or expertise. Jennifer stood to respond, and despite her smaller stature and less expensive suit, she commanded the room with quiet authority. Your Honor, the archdiocese's argument sounds reasonable until you examine the facts. Yes, Father Michael Chen was a priest. But when the archdiocese abandoned the St. Lucia mission in 1995, declaring it financially unviable, Father Michael took personal ownership. The church formally deeded the property to him. We have the documentation to avoid liability for a building they no longer wanted to maintain. She presented the evidence Maya had found. Letters from the archdiocese abandoning the mission. Transfer documents showing personal ownership. Receipts showing Father Michael paid all maintenance costs from his own pension for nearly 30 years. The archdiocese is trying to have it both ways, Jennifer continued. They abandoned this property when it was worthless. Now that it's valuable, they want it back. But abandonment means relinquishing claim. You can't abandon property for 30 years and then claim ownership when someone else makes it valuable through their own effort and resources. David Chun stood again. The reliquary changes everything. Sacred relics cannot be privately owned under canon law. The presence of St. Lucia's remains. Alleged remains, Jennifer interrupted. There's been no verification that the bone fragment is actually from St. Lucia. The reliquary itself is valuable medieval gold work, but its religious significance is unproven. Judge Sullivan held up a hand. Let's address the core legal question. Mr. Chun, does the archdiocese have documentation showing they retained ownership of the property or its contents after transferring the deed to Father Michael Chun? David Chun hesitated. The transfer was administrative, Your Honor. It didn't constitute true alienation of church property. Do you have documentation stating that? The nature of church property is that it's held in trust for religious purposes regardless of whose name appears on deeds. That's not an answer to my question. Do you have documentation? No, Your Honor, but then you're asking me to override a legal property transfer based on implied intent rather than documented fact. Judge Sullivan turned to Jennifer. Miss Rodriguez, does your client have clear legal title to the property and its fixtures? Yes, Your Honor. Through properly executed will and probate, with no claims filed during the legal notification period. The judge reviewed the documents before her for several minutes while the courtroom waited in tense silence. Finally, she looked up. The injunction is denied. Miss Chun has clear legal ownership of the property and its contents. The archdiocese may pursue their claim through normal litigation, but there's no basis for immediate transfer of custody. As for the reliquary, until its religious significance is definitively established, it's treated as a valuable artifact subject to the same ownership as the mosaics. David Chun stood quickly. Your Honor, we request expedited trial. Request noted. We'll schedule preliminary hearings. But in the meantime, Miss Chun retains possession and control. She banged her gavel. Next case. Maya walked out of the courthouse in a daze. They'd won the injunction hearing. The reliquary stayed with her. The archdiocese couldn't seize anything immediately, but the victory felt fragile, temporary, a small battle won in what would clearly be a long war. News cameras waited outside. Reporters shouted questions. Maya kept her head down, following Jennifer through the crowd to her car. But one voice cut through the chaos. A television reporter Maya recognized from the local news. "Miss Chen, what will you do with artifacts worth over $100 million?" Maya stopped, turned, met the camera directly. "I haven't decided yet. But whatever I do, it won't be selling them to the highest bidder. My uncle protected these mosaics for 40 years. He could have sold them, could have lived comfortably. Instead, he chose to preserve them for the community. I'm going to honor that choice, even if it means staying poor." The question was cruel in its bluntness, but Maya answered honestly. "Poverty isn't a choice I made. It's a condition imposed by systems that extract everything from working people and give back nothing. But I won't escape poverty by betraying my uncle's legacy or by letting powerful institutions take what belongs here, in this neighborhood, in this community." The clip went viral within hours. Maya is standing outside the courthouse, still wearing the same clothes she'd worn to her final shift at the convenience store, declaring she'd choose principle over profit. The comments section exploded with reactions ranging from admiration to condemnation. "She's an idiot. Take the money and run." Finally, someone with integrity. "Not everything is for sale. Easy to be principled when you're sitting on $100 million. She's going to regret this. The church in Blackwood will destroy her." That evening, Maya returned to the mission to find something had changed. The neighborhood, watch it grown. Would have been 15 volunteers was now nearly 50. People brought food, supplies, tools. Someone had set up a proper security system, cameras, lights, motion sensors. Marcus from the bodega had organized a fundraiser that raised $3,000 for immediate repairs and legal fees. Elena pulled Maya aside. "People are inspired by you. They're seeing someone fight back against the powerful. That matters more than you know." But inspiration didn't pay bills. Maya had lost her job. The eviction deadline was 3 weeks away. Her savings were depleted. She had no income and no prospect for quick employment. Lily needed food, clothes, school supplies. The utilities in the studio apartment were overdue. She sat in the mission's back office, going through Father Michael's papers again, looking for anything she might have missed. That's when she found the second hidden compartment. It was beneath a loose floorboard under the desk, a space about 2 feet square and a foot deep. Inside was a metal box, locked with a combination lock. Maya tried various numbers, Father Michael's birth date, her own birth date, the year the mission was founded. Nothing worked. Then she remembered something from his funeral. The priest had mentioned Father Michael's favorite Bible verse, John 3 verse 16. She tried 3 to 16 and the lock clicked open. Inside the box were documents. Not religious records or property deeds, but research. Decades of Father Michael's personal investigation into the mosaic's history and value. He'd known, maybe not the exact monetary worth, but he'd known the mosaics were authentic Byzantine work from Enia Moni. He'd contacted experts in the 1980s, received preliminary assessments. He'd researched Thomas Blackwood's acquisition of the panels, traced the provenance chain, documented everything. And he'd deliberately chosen not to sell. There was a letter addressed to Maya, dated 2 months before his death. "My dear niece, if you're reading this, I'm gone and you've discovered what I spent my life protecting. I know the mosaics are worth millions. I've known for nearly 40 years. I could have sold them, lived comfortably, helped more people directly with the money. But I came to understand that some things have value beyond money. These mosaics were created by faithful people 1,000 years ago. They survived wars, earthquakes, theft, and time itself because people chose to protect rather than exploit them. Thomas Blackwood brought them here to preserve them in a sacred space. Father Jonathan built this mission to house them properly. When I inherited this responsibility, I faced the same choice you're facing now. Sell and solve immediate problems, or preserve and honor something larger than myself. I chose preservation, not because I'm noble or wise, but because I understood that the moment I sold them, they'd disappear into private collections or museum vaults. They'd become property of the wealthy, trophies proving their cultural sophistication. The people of Riverside, the community this mission was built to serve, would never see them again. I don't know what you'll decide. Your circumstances are harder than mine were. You have a daughter who deserves security I never had to provide. You face pressures I can only imagine. But I'm asking you to consider that perhaps the greatest inheritance isn't the mosaic's monetary value. It's the responsibility to ensure they serve the people they were meant to serve. The poor, the struggling, the community that has nothing but needs beauty and hope more than anyone. Whatever you decide, know that I love you and I believe in you. You're stronger than you know, braver than you think, and capable of things that will surprise even yourself. Your uncle, Father Michael. Maya read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. He'd known the burden he was placing on her, known the sacrifice he was asking, but he believed she'd find a way to honor both the art and the community. The question was how. The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. James Whitmore called the next morning with a proposal. Maya, I've been consulting with colleagues at several major museums. We want to create a consortium, a group of institutions that would jointly acquire the mosaics, but with specific conditions that address your concerns about community access. I'm listening. The Metropolitan, the Getty, and the Walters Art Museum would each contribute to a purchase price of $130 million. But instead of taking the mosaics to New York or Los Angeles, we'd fund the complete restoration of the St. Lucia Mission as a dedicated museum and cultural center. Maya's heart raced. You want to keep them here? The mosaics are part of California's history. They belong here. The consortium would fund building restoration, climate control systems, security, professional staff. The mission would become a free public museum focused on Byzantine art and accessible to everyone, especially the Riverside community. And the money? $30 million would go to the restoration and endowment. The remaining $100 million would be yours. Enough to change your life, fund education, help your community, and still preserve your uncle's legacy. It was everything Maya had hoped for. A way to keep the mosaics in Riverside while securing Lily's future. A solution that honored Father Michael's vision while solving her immediate crisis. But Richard Blackwood had other plans. The city council meeting was packed. Richard Blackwood, as council member, had placed an emergency agenda item, resolution for cultural preservation through eminent domain. His argument was smooth, well-rehearsed, and superficially compelling. The St. Lucia mission contains cultural treasures of international significance. These Byzantine mosaics belong not to one person, but to all of humanity. The city has a responsibility to ensure their proper preservation and public access. We propose exercising eminent domain to acquire the property for fair market value and establish it as a city-owned cultural center. His presentation included architectural renderings of a restored mission, professional staff proposals, and glowing testimonials from art historians about the importance of public stewardship. What he didn't mention was that his plan involved selling the mosaics to private collectors he'd already lined up, using the proceeds to fund other city projects, and giving him significant control over a $100 million transaction. Jennifer had warned Maya this was coming. Eminent domain is legal, but it requires proving the taking serves genuine public interest. If they're planning to sell the mosaics, that undermines the public interest argument. Now Maya stood at the public comment podium, facing the council members and an audience of 200 people. Blackwood sat at the council table with a slight smile, confident in his political power and connections. My name is Maya Chen, she began, her voice steadier than she felt. I worked at the convenience store on Riverside Avenue. I'm a single mother. I live in a studio apartment above a laundromat. 3 weeks ago, I inherited a condemned building that everyone said was worthless. The St. Lucia mission isn't just valuable art. It's community history. My great-great-grandfather built it. My uncle preserved it for 40 years, living in poverty rather than profit from it. The mosaics were meant to serve this community, to be accessible to people who never get to visit museums in New York or Los Angeles. My dear niece, if you're reading this, I'm gone and you've discovered what I spent my life protecting. I know the mosaics are worth millions. I've known for nearly 40 years. I could have sold them, lived comfortably, helped more people directly with the money. But I came to understand that some things have value beyond money. These mosaics were created by faithful people 1,000 years ago. They survived wars, earthquakes, theft, and time itself because people chose to protect rather than exploit them. Thomas Blackwood brought them here to preserve them in a sacred space. Father Jonathan built this mission to house them properly. When I inherited this responsibility, I faced the same choice you're facing now. Sell and solve immediate problems, or preserve and honor something larger than myself. I chose preservation, not because I'm noble or wise, but because I understood that the moment I sold them, they'd disappear into private collections or museum vaults. They'd become property of the wealthy, trophies proving their cultural sophistication. The people of Riverside, the community this mission was built to serve, would never see them again. I don't know what you'll decide. Your circumstances are harder than mine were. You have a daughter who deserves security I never had to provide. You face pressures I can only imagine. But I'm asking you to consider that perhaps the greatest inheritance isn't the mosaic's monetary value. It's the responsibility to ensure they serve the people they were meant to serve. The poor, the struggling, the community that has nothing but needs beauty and hope more than anyone. Whatever you decide, know that I love you and I believe in you. You're stronger than you know, braver than you think, and capable of things that will surprise even yourself. Your uncle, Father Michael. Maya read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. He'd known the burden he was placing on her, known the sacrifice he was asking, but he believed she'd find a way to honor both the art and the community. The question was how. The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. James Whitmore called the next morning with a proposal. Maya, I've been consulting with colleagues at several major museums. We want to create a consortium, a group of institutions that would jointly acquire the mosaics, but with specific conditions that address your concerns about community access. I'm listening. The Metropolitan, the Getty, and the Walters Art Museum would each contribute to a purchase price of $130 million. But instead of taking the mosaics to New York or Los Angeles, we'd fund the complete restoration of the St. Lucia Mission as a dedicated museum and cultural center. Maya's heart raced. You want to keep them here? The mosaics are part of California's history. They belong here. The consortium would fund building restoration, climate control systems, security, professional staff. The mission would become a free public museum focused on Byzantine art and accessible to everyone, especially the Riverside community. And the money? $30 million would go to the restoration and endowment. The remaining $100 million would be yours. Enough to change your life, fund education, help your community, and still preserve your uncle's legacy. It was everything Maya had hoped for. A way to keep the mosaics in Riverside while securing Lily's future. A solution that honored Father Michael's vision while solving her immediate crisis. But Richard Blackwood had other plans. The city council meeting was packed. Richard Blackwood, as council member, had placed an emergency agenda item, resolution for cultural preservation through eminent domain. His argument was smooth, well-rehearsed, and superficially compelling. The St. Lucia mission contains cultural treasures of international significance. These Byzantine mosaics belong not to one person, but to all of humanity. The city has a responsibility to ensure their proper preservation and public access. We propose exercising eminent domain to acquire the property for fair market value and establish it as a city-owned cultural center. His presentation included architectural renderings of a restored mission, professional staff proposals, and glowing testimonials from art historians about the importance of public stewardship. What he didn't mention was that his plan involved selling the mosaics to private collectors he'd already lined up, using the proceeds to fund other city projects, and giving him significant control over a $100 million transaction. Jennifer had warned Maya this was coming. Eminent domain is legal, but it requires proving the taking serves genuine public interest. If they're planning to sell the mosaics, that undermines the public interest argument. Now Maya stood at the public comment podium, facing the council members and an audience of 200 people. Blackwood sat at the council table with a slight smile, confident in his political power and connections. My name is Maya Chen, she began, her voice steadier than she felt. I worked at the convenience store on Riverside Avenue. I'm a single mother. I live in a studio apartment above a laundromat. 3 weeks ago, I inherited a condemned building that everyone said was worthless. The St. Lucia mission isn't just valuable art. It's community history. My great-great-grandfather built it. My uncle preserved it for 40 years, living in poverty rather than profit from it. The mosaics were meant to serve this community, to be accessible to people who never get to visit museums in New York or Los Angeles. Low in natural light. The resurrection panel depicted Christ rising with a radiance that filled the entire composition. The reliquary was placed in a special display case, temperature and humidity controlled, with information about its history and significance. The Archdiocese had requested it be available for religious veneration, and Maya had agreed. The museum would host monthly services where Catholic faithful could pray before the relic. It wasn't surrender. It was recognition that sacred objects could serve multiple purposes, that spiritual significance and cultural preservation weren't mutually exclusive. Dr. Whitmore oversaw the museological aspects, ensuring the displays were both academically rigorous and accessible to non-experts. Interactive exhibits explained Byzantine mosaic techniques, the history of Ine Moni, the journey of the panels from Greece to California. A special section honored Father Michael, displaying his personal research, photographs from his decades at the mission, testimonials from people he'd helped. His letter to Maya was framed and mounted, his explanation of why he'd chosen preservation over profit. The museum opened on a Saturday in June, 2 years after Maya had first signed the property transfer papers. Over 1,000 people attended the opening ceremony. Archbishop Williams came, offering a blessing despite the legal defeat. Richard Blackwood didn't attend, but sent a formal letter acknowledging his family's historical connection to the mosaics. Dr. Whitmore gave a speech about the discovery's art historical significance. Jennifer spoke about the legal battle and its implications for property rights. Elena shared memories of Father Michael and the mission's role in the community. Then Maya spoke, standing before the assembled crowd with Lily beside her. 2 years ago, I was working double shifts at a convenience store, struggling to feed my daughter and facing eviction. I inherited a building everyone said was worthless and discovered it contained treasure worth more money than I could imagine. I could have sold everything, could have taken the money and solved every financial problem I faced. A lot of people thought I should. Some still think I'm foolish for not doing it. But my uncle taught me something important, even though he's gone. He taught me that guardianship matters more than ownership, that some things are too important to sell, that beauty and history and community access have value that can't be measured in dollars. This museum isn't mine. It belongs to Riverside, to California, to everyone who comes through these doors. The mosaics are finally serving the purpose they were meant to serve, inspiring people, connecting us to history, reminding us that humans have always created beauty even in difficult times. My uncle lived in poverty to protect this. I'm not poor anymore. The sale proceeds are allowing me to live comfortably, and I'm working here as the museum's community director. But that was never the point. The point was ensuring these treasures stayed where they belong, serving the people who need them most. The audience applauded. Lily tugged on her mother's hand, and together they walked through the restored mission, watching people experience the mosaics for the first time. Families from Riverside who'd never been to a museum before stood in awe before the panels. Children asked questions about how the tiles were made. Elderly parishioners who remembered attending services here decades ago cried at seeing it restored. Marcus from the bodega brought his grandchildren, explaining how Father Michael had helped their family. Elena lit a candle before the reliquary, praying in Spanish. Ricardo brought his construction crew to admire the structural work they consulted on. This was what Father Michael had envisioned. Not wealth concentrated in one person's hands, but treasure shared among everyone. Not art locked away in private collections, but beauty accessible to all. Over the following months, the St. Lucia Byzantine Museum became a destination. School groups came for educational programs. Art historians visited to study the mosaics. Tourists included it in their California itineraries. But most importantly, Riverside residents came, people who'd lived near the mission for years without knowing what it contained, discovering their neighborhood held treasures rivaling anything in major museums. The museum offered free admission for all Riverside residents. It hosted after-school art programs for kids. It provided meeting space for community organizations. It employed local residents as guides, security staff, and maintenance workers. Maya's role as community director meant ensuring the museum served its neighborhood first, tourists second. She organized special events celebrating Riverside's diverse cultures. She created partnerships with schools, making the museum an extension of art and history curricula. The proceeds from the consortium purchase, $100 million after the restoration endowment was funded, went into a foundation Maya established. The Father Michael Chen Community Fund provided grants for education, healthcare, housing assistance, and small business development in Riverside. Maya took a modest salary as the foundation's director, enough to live comfortably but not extravagantly. Most of the money stayed in the endowment, generating annual income that supported dozens of families and organizations. She bought a small house 3 blocks from the museum. Nothing fancy, but it had 3 bedrooms and a yard where Lily could play. Lily attended a good school where her lunch account was always funded and she had new clothes when she needed them. But Maya hadn't forgotten what poverty felt like. She volunteered at the food bank. She mentored other single mothers. She used her story to advocate for better wages and worker protections. And every morning, she walked to the museum she'd helped save, passing the mosaic of St. Lucia above the entrance, the saint who'd held her lamp high to light the way for others. 1 year after the museum opened, Richard Blackwood requested a meeting. Maya agreed, curious about what he wanted after everything that had happened. They met at a coffee shop downtown. Blackwood looked older, his silver hair thinner, his confident bearing diminished. He'd lost his city council seat, faced investigation for the eminent domain scheme, and seen his reputation significantly damaged. "I owe you an apology," he said without preamble. "I treated you terribly. I saw the mosaics as property to be acquired and you as an obstacle to be removed. I was wrong." Maya studied him carefully. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because my grandfather's donation was supposed to benefit this community. Instead, I tried to exploit it for personal gain. You did what he intended. You made the mosaics accessible and meaningful to people who need them." He pulled out a checkbook. "I'd like to make a donation to the Father Michael Chen Community Fund. It won't undo the damage I caused, but it's a start." The check was for $2 million. Maya stared at it, then at Blackwood. "This doesn't make us friends. I know, but it's the right thing to do. And maybe, eventually, you could tell people I try to make amends." Maya accepted the check. The money would help dozens of families, would fund programs and services. Forgiveness could wait, but practical assistance for her community couldn't. Lily graduated from elementary school with honors, went to middle school with confidence and security Maya had never known at that age. She brought friends to the museum, proudly explaining that her mom had saved it, that her great-great-great-grandfather had built it, that the beautiful mosaics were part of her family's history. On the 2nd anniversary of the museum's opening, Dr. Whitmore organized a symposium on Byzantine art. Scholars from around the world came to study the St. Lucia mosaics, presenting papers and conducting research. The proceedings would be published, ensuring the discovery received full academic recognition. During the symposium's opening reception, Dr. Whitmore pulled Maya aside. "I've worked in museums for 30 years. I've seen countless acquisitions, exhibitions, and discoveries. But this is the one I'm most proud of. Not because of the art's monetary value or historical significance, but because it's serving its highest purpose." "What purpose is that?" "Reminding people that we're capable of creating and preserving beauty even in difficult circumstances. That communities matter. That sometimes the right choice isn't the profitable choice." Maya smiled. Father Michael would have liked that. She stood in the museum's main room, surrounded by mosaics that had survived 1,000 years. The Annunciation panel glowed in late afternoon light. The Resurrection panel radiated hope. The saints and apostles in the smaller panels seemed to watch over the space with benevolent protection. These tiles had been set by Byzantine artisans in the 11th century, during a golden age of religious art. They'd survived the monastery's earthquake damage, the transatlantic journey, installation in a California mission, decades of neglect and decay. They'd survived because people chose to protect them. Thomas Blackwood, who purchased them for preservation rather than profit. Father Jonathan, who built a mission to house them. Father Michael, who lived in poverty to guard them. And now Maya, who'd risked everything to ensure they remained accessible to everyone. The guardianship would continue. Long after Maya was gone, the museum would endure. The mosaics would inspire future generations. The community would benefit from the foundation support. That was the real inheritance, not the money, but the responsibility to care for something larger than yourself. To understand that some treasures belong to everyone, that beauty should be shared, that community mattered more than individual wealth. Maya had started with $34.12 in her bank account, a condemned building, and determination born of desperation. She'd faced down wealthy opponents, powerful institutions, and her own exhaustion and fear. She'd won not by defeating them completely, but by refusing to surrender the principles that mattered most, by choosing guardianship over ownership, by honoring her uncle's legacy and her community's needs. The mosaics would endure. The museum would thrive. And Maya would continue her work, knowing she'd done something that transcended money or personal gain. She'd proven that sometimes the greatest treasure isn't what you own, but what you protect for others. That determination and principle could overcome wealth and power. That one person's courage could inspire a community. Lily found her mother standing before the resurrection panel, lost in thought. "Mama, are you okay?" Maya pulled her daughter close. "Yeah, baby. I'm better than okay. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Together, they walked through the museum as evening light painted the mosaics in gold and amber. Visitors moved through the space with reverence and wonder. Guards changed shifts. The building that had been condemned and abandoned now thrived with life and purpose. Outside, Riverside continued its daily rhythms. People worked and struggled, hoped and persevered. And in the heart of their neighborhood stood a museum that reminded them beauty existed, that history mattered, that someone had cared enough to preserve treasure for everyone to share. The St. Lucia Byzantine Museum would stand for generations, a testament to what happened when guardianship mattered more than greed, when community prevailed over power, when one woman's determination changed everything. Maya's inheritance hadn't just been mosaics worth hundreds of millions. It had been the choice to become someone who protected rather than exploited, who shared rather than hoarded, who understood that the greatest wealth came not from what you owned, but from what you preserved for others. And that inheritance, unlike money that could be spent or lost, would endure forever. 5 years after the museum opened, Maya received a phone call that would reveal the final secret Father Michael had kept. The caller was Dr. Helena Stavros, an elderly Greek woman whose voice carried the weight of 8 decades and urgent purpose. "Miss Chen, I must speak with you about the Nea Moni mosaics. I have information about the reliquary. Information that changes everything." They met at the museum on a quiet Tuesday morning. Dr. Stavros arrived supported by a cane, her daughter helping her navigate the entrance. But once inside, seeing the mosaics, the old woman's frailty seemed to fall away. She stood before the resurrection panel with tears streaming down her weathered face. "My God," she whispered in Greek-accented English. "It's really here. After all these years, it's survived." Maya guided her to a bench, brought water, waited patiently while Dr. Stavros composed herself. Finally, the elderly scholar spoke. "I'm the last surviving descendant of the monks who created these mosaics. My great-great-grandfather, Brother Philippos, was the master artisan who designed and installed the Nea Moni cycle in 1067. Our family kept records, detailed journals describing not just the artistic work, but what was hidden within it. She pulled documents from her bag, pages protected in archival sleeves, covered in Greek script and technical drawings. Maya's hands trembled as she examined them. The reliquary you found, Dr. Stavros continued, contains more than St. Lucia's relic. The monks embedded something else inside the golden casing. Something they knew would be discovered only when the right person found it. What do you mean? Dr. Stavros's daughter, Sophia, spoke up. We've been researching this for 30 years, ever since my mother discovered her ancestors' journals. The reliquary has a false bottom, a hidden compartment that opens only when exposed to specific conditions. What conditions? Extended exposure to natural light at a particular angle, combined with a temperature shift. The Byzantine artisans were sophisticated metallurgists. They created a mechanism that would activate after years of proper museum display. Protection against theft or hasty exploitation. Maya felt her heart racing. Are you saying there's something still hidden inside the reliquary? According to Brother Philippos' journals, yes. The monks knew the empire was unstable, that treasures would be stolen or destroyed. They created an insurance policy, documentation of the Byzantine Empire's most valuable remaining artifacts, their locations, their provenance. A map, essentially, to cultural treasures that could be preserved if the empire fell. And this documentation is in the reliquary? If the journals are accurate, yes. The monks sealed it inside, designed a mechanism to activate only after extended proper storage, ensuring whoever possessed it would be someone dedicated to preservation rather than quick profit. They examined the reliquary that afternoon. Dr. Whitmore flew in from New York. Dr. Stone brought specialized equipment. Under carefully controlled conditions, they adjusted the lighting and temperature precisely as Brother Philippos' journal specified. For 3 hours, nothing happened. Then, as the afternoon sun struck the reliquary at a specific angle, a barely audible click resonated from within the golden casing. Dr. Stone's hands shook as she carefully examined the base. A thin seam had appeared, invisible before, now revealing a hidden compartment no larger than a deck of cards. Inside, wrapped in silk that had somehow survived 9 centuries, lay a small manuscript. Pages of vellum covered in meticulous Greek script, accompanied by drawings and maps. Dr. Stavros translated, her voice breaking with emotion. It's exactly as the journals described. Brother Philippos documented 37 major Byzantine artifacts, mosaics, reliquaries, icons, manuscripts, that the monks had hidden or smuggled to safety. He listed their locations, their descriptions, their historical significance. Are they still there? Maya whispered. After 1,000 years, some locations no longer exist. But several, Dr. Stavros pointed to specific entries. These were hidden in structures that still stand. Churches, monasteries, private chapels. If this information is accurate, there could be Byzantine treasures worth billions still hidden, waiting to be recovered. The revelation was staggering. The mosaics Maya had inherited weren't just valuable art. They were the key to potentially the largest Byzantine art discovery in history. The reliquary's true purpose hadn't been merely to house St. Lucia's relic, but to preserve knowledge that could lead to recovering countless lost masterpieces. Dr. Whitmore's voice was hushed with awe. This changes everything. We're not talking about one collection anymore. We're talking about potentially recovering a significant portion of lost Byzantine cultural heritage. What happens now? Maya asked. Dr. Stavros placed her weathered hand over Maya's. That depends on you. This manuscript names locations, but you found it. Under international law, you have rights to the information. Museums and governments will want access. Collectors will offer fortunes. You could become one of the wealthiest people in the world simply by selling this information. Maya thought about Father Michael, who'd known about the mosaic's value and chosen poverty. About the choice between exploitation and guardianship. About what this manuscript represented. Not just money, but the recovery of humanity's cultural memory. We publish it, she said quietly. We make the information freely available to archaeological institutions, museums, and governments. We organize international expeditions to recover the artifacts Brother Filippo's documented. And we ensure everything we find is preserved for public access, not private profit. Dr. Whitmore started to protest. Maya, do you understand what you're giving up? The licensing fees alone could be worth hundreds of millions. I understand perfectly. This manuscript isn't mine to exploit. It's humanity's heritage. Brother Filippo's didn't preserve this information for 1,000 years so someone could get rich. He preserved it so these treasures could be recovered and protected. Dr. Stavros smiled, tears flowing freely. You are exactly who needed to find this. Brother Filippo's wrote in his journal that the mechanism would activate only for the guardian who values preservation over possession. He was right to trust in that. The announcement came 3 months later. The St. Lucia Byzantine Museum, in partnership with UNESCO, the Greek government, and major museums worldwide, revealed the discovery of Brother Filippo's manuscript and launched the Byzantine Heritage Recovery Initiative. The manuscript was published in full, freely accessible online, with translations in 12 languages. Archaeological teams began investigating the documented locations. Within the first year, they recovered 6 major mosaics, 2 illuminated manuscripts, and a reliquary containing what appeared to be Byzantine imperial regalia. Every recovered artifact was cataloged, preserved, and displayed in public museums. Nothing was sold to private collectors. Everything remained accessible to everyone. Maya coordinated the initiative from the St. Lucia Museum, which became the project's international headquarters. She worked with archaeologists, historians, and government officials, ensuring Brother Filippo's vision of preservation was honored. The financial offers were astronomical. Collectors offered $10 million just for detailed photographs of specific manuscript pages. Governments offered $50 million for exclusive access to information about artifacts in their territories. One billionaire offered a blank check for the manuscript itself. Maya declined every offer. The manuscript remained in the museum, displayed alongside the reliquary, available for any researcher to study. Her decision was criticized by some who thought she was foolish to reject such wealth. But it was celebrated by many more who recognized what she represented, the principle that some things were too important to commodify. The Father Michael Chen Community Fund, already substantial, received donations from around the world. People inspired by Maya's choices contributed what they could. The fund grew to over $300 million, supporting communities throughout California and beyond. Lily, now 13, understood her mother's decisions in ways she couldn't have at 7. She helped catalog new discoveries, learned Greek to read the manuscripts, developed a passion for archaeology and cultural preservation. "Mama," she said one evening, "my friends at school think you're crazy for turning down so much money. What do you think? I think you're showing me what matters. Anyone can sell things, but protecting them so everyone can enjoy them, that takes real courage." Maya hugged her daughter, feeling the weight of choices that had defined their lives. They weren't wealthy, though they lived comfortably. They didn't own mansions or drive luxury cars, but they had purpose, community, and the knowledge that their work mattered beyond personal gain. The studio apartment above the laundromat felt like ancient history now. So did the convenience store, the eviction notices, the nights Maya had cried from exhaustion, wondering how she'd feed her daughter. But she never forgot those struggles. They informed everything she did, every decision she made with the foundation, every program the museum created. One morning, Maya received an unexpected visitor. Archbishop Williams, now in his 80s and officially retired, asked to see her privately. They sat in the museum's small chapel. Yes, the restored building included a functioning chapel where services were held weekly, honoring the building's original religious purpose. "I came to apologize," the archbishop said. "The archdiocese fought you because we thought we had the right to control these treasures. We were wrong. You've done more to serve God's purpose with these mosaics than we ever would have. Your Grace." "Please let me finish." Father Michael understood something we didn't. That sacred things are meant to serve people, not to be controlled by institutions. You honored his vision. You honored God's intention for beauty to inspire and uplift everyone, especially the poor and struggling. He pulled out a letter. The Archdiocese is making a donation to your foundation. $5 million. It's not enough to undo our opposition, but it's an acknowledgement that you were right and we were wrong. Maya accepted the letter with grace. Father Michael would have appreciated this. He never stopped loving the church, even when the church gave up on him. He was a better priest than most of us, and you're a better guardian than any institution could be. After the archbishop left, Maya stood alone in the chapel, surrounded by mosaics that glowed in afternoon light. She thought about the journey from that coffee shop where she'd signed the property transfer papers to this moment. She'd been offered, in total, over $400 million for various rights to the mosaics, the reliquary, the manuscript, and the information it contained. She declined it all, choosing instead to ensure everything remained public, accessible, and dedicated to recovery rather than profit. The practical value of what she'd given up was staggering, but the actual value, the artifacts recovered, the communities served, the example set, was incalculable. Dr. Stavros passed away the following spring, at peace knowing her ancestors' work had been honored. At her funeral, attended by archaeologists and historians from around the world, Maya gave the eulogy. Dr. Stavros spent 30 years researching her ancestors' legacy. She could have kept that research private, could have personally profited from what she knew. Instead, she shared it freely, trusted it to someone she'd just met, and ensured Brother Filippo's vision was fulfilled. That's the thread connecting everyone in this story. Brother Filippo's, Thomas Blackwood, Father Jonathan, Father Michael, Dr. Stavros, and all of us here today. We're guardians, not owners. We protect beauty so others can experience it. We preserve knowledge so humanity doesn't lose its memory. Some people think that's foolish. They think everything should be bought and sold. That value only matters if it's monetized. But they're wrong. The things that matter most, love, beauty, knowledge, community, can't be owned. They can only be shared. The Byzantine Heritage Recovery Initiative continued expanding. By its 10th year, the project had recovered 43 major artifacts, written comprehensive histories of 17 destroyed Byzantine sites, and trained hundreds of archaeologists and conservators. The Street Lucia Museum doubled in size, adding wings for the recovered artifacts and educational facilities. It became one of California's most visited cultural institutions, with over 1 million visitors annually, most of them from Riverside and surrounding communities, taking advantage of the free admission for residents. Maya's work was recognized internationally. She received honorary doctorates, preservation awards, and UNESCO commendations. But what meant most to her were the letters from single mothers, from struggling families, from people who'd visited the museum and felt hope. Your story showed me that poverty doesn't mean powerlessness, one woman wrote. That determination matters more than wealth. That choosing principle over profit isn't foolish, it's heroic. On the 10th anniversary of the museum's opening, Maya stood before the assembled crowd for the celebration. Lily, now 17 and planning to study archaeology in college, stood beside her. Elena and Ricardo, now in their 70s but still active in the community, sat in the front row. Dr. Whitmore and Dr. Stone had flown in from New York. Hundreds of people filled the main hall. 10 years ago, Maya began, I inherited a condemned building and discovered treasure I couldn't comprehend. I've been asked countless times whether I regret not selling it, whether I wish I'd taken the money and lived differently. The answer is no. Not once, not ever. Because this, she gestured to the museum, to the people, to the mosaics glowing around them. This is worth more than any amount of money. This museum serves 70,000 visitors a year. The foundation has helped 500 families avoid eviction, funded education for 3,000 students, and supported 30 small businesses. The Heritage Initiative has recovered cultural treasures that would have been lost forever. I started with $34 in my bank account and a daughter who deserved better. Now I have enough, and she has a future where she can choose purpose over profit, where she understands that guardianship is the highest calling. Father Michael spent 40 years protecting these mosaics. I've spent 10. Lily will spend her career recovering and preserving artifacts. And generations after us will continue the work. Because some things are too important to sell. Some responsibilities transcend individual gain. Some choices define who we are and what we value. Thank you for being part of this journey. Thank you for understanding that the greatest inheritance isn't money. It's the responsibility to protect beauty for everyone forever. The crowd rose in standing ovation. But Maya's attention was caught by a young woman in the back, maybe 25, holding a toddler and crying. After the ceremony, the woman approached. "Miss Chen, I'm Sarah Martinez. I'm Jennifer Rodriguez's niece, your lawyer's niece. I just got evicted from my apartment. I'm working 3 jobs but can't afford first and last month's rent for a new place. I came here because, I don't know why, because your story gives me hope, I guess." Maya took her hand. "Come with me." She walked Sarah to the foundation office, filled out an emergency assistance form, and within an hour had arranged temporary housing and first month's rent for a proper apartment. "But why?" Sarah asked, overwhelmed. "You don't know me. 10 years ago, I was you. People helped me. Elena, Ricardo, Marcus, Jennifer. Now I help others. That's how it works. That's what this is all about." As Sarah left with her toddler, tears of gratitude streaming, Maya understood finally and completely what Father Michael had tried to tell her in his letter. The mosaic's value wasn't the $150 million they could have sold for. It was this moment, helping someone who needed it, using resources to serve others, continuing the cycle of guardianship and generosity that had preserved beauty across 1,000 years. That evening, Maya walked through the empty museum, checking locks and security systems. She passed the Annunciation panel, the Resurrection panel, the saints and apostles that had watched over this space for over a century in California and 9 centuries before that in Greece. She stopped before Brother Filippo's manuscript, displayed in its climate-controlled case beside the reliquary. The monk had preserved information for a millennium, trusting that the right person would eventually find it and choose wisdom over wealth. He'd been right to trust, just as Father Michael had been right to trust Maya. Just as Maya trusted Lily and future guardians to continue protecting what mattered most. The building was silent except for the soft hum of climate control systems. Through the windows, she could see Riverside, her neighborhood, her community, the place where she'd struggled and persevered and ultimately triumphed, not through wealth but through purpose. Maya Chen had inherited a condemned building and discovered treasures worth hundreds of millions. She'd faced down billionaires, fought institutions, and chosen guardianship over ownership at every turn. She'd started with nothing and ended with everything that mattered. Purpose, community, legacy, and the knowledge that she'd protected beauty for everyone, forever. That was the real treasure. That was the inheritance worth keeping. And as she locked the museum doors and walked home through Riverside streets, past neighbors who greeted her warmly and children who dreamed of being archaeologists like the lady who saved the pretty building, Maya understood that she was the richest person in the world. Not because of money, because of meaning.